Sheesh, it's taken me a while to go over this game. First, I couldn't do Curse of the Moon because there were other games I wanted to talk about. Then when Ritual of the Night released, I ended up getting the Switch version, which as many of you unfortunately know, had a lot of performance issues and input lag during launch, so I had to wait for an entire year's worth of updates to make it more playable. And of course, by the time I actually do start playing the game, Curse of the Moon 2 just came out. I cannot catch a break with this series.
Well, no matter. Where Curse of the Moon was a throwback to old school NES Castlevania titles, Ritual of the Night was a long-anticipated return to the Metroidvania style of Castlevania gameplay fans had been eagerly awaiting since 2008 after Order of Ecclesia for the DS. Once again, it was run by Koji Igarashi, former Castlevania producer and former employee of Konami. After his departure, he created a Kickstarter campaign to get the ball rolling for Ritual of the Night, since he saw how well the Mighty No. 9 campaign did, before that game disappointed most of its backers anyway. Ritual of the Night became one of the most funded video games ever put on Kickstarter, with an overwhelming amount of backers and stretch goals met, one of which was developing Curse of the Moon as a prequel game to Ritual of the Night. You can find my thoughts on it at the card up top in case you're interested. That one was done by Inti Creates, whereas Ritual of the Night was developed by Koji Igarashi Studio Artplay, with this as their first game. To no one's surprise, it delivered what it promised, the classic Metroidvania style of gameplay acting as a massive love letter to Castlevania fans, while also making sure that it's a game newcomers can enjoy as well. There were many other Metroidvania games that filled the 11-year gap, mostly in the indie crowd, but there's something about the Castlevania ones that make them oh so special. They have a certain feel to them, whether it's the gothic atmosphere, the level design, or the RPG elements. There's a secret ingredient that only the makers of Castlevania know of, and that's including Koji Igarashi, since he was one of the scenario writers and programmers for Castlevania Symphony of the Night, where the term Metroidvania originated from. Aside from that game, I've only ever played one other Metroidvania title within the Castlevania series, and that was Portrait of Ruin for the DS. I haven't played any of the other DS or Game Boy Advance entries, so I apologize in advance if I forget or say something incorrect about this particular set of games. The story takes place in 18th century England, where the country is overrun by demons and the Alchemy Guild learn to create what are known as shardbinders, humans whose bodies are fused with crystals containing demonic powers, as an attempt to level the playing field. The shardbinders were sacrificed by the guild to open the gates of hell and try to threaten the demons, but that instead brought even more destruction, killing everyone in the guild and destroying most of England. The church was eventually able to banish the demons though, and two shardbinders managed to survive their sacrifice, Jeeble and Miriam from Curse of the Moon, with Miriam having fallen into a deep slumber before the ritual could be done. However, the effects of the shards have still cursed her and Jeeble, doomed to die after their whole bodies eventually turn to crystal. 10 years pass and Miriam awakens, finding out that Jeeble has summoned more demons to take revenge on any surviving alchemist for turning him into a shardbinder and using him. Miriam is joined by Johannes, a former member of the Alchemy Guild, and soon after, an exorcist named Dominique who helped Johannes take care of Miriam while she slept. Miriam is tasked with stopping Jeeble by traversing through his castle, the Hellhold, which is nearby a village he destroyed, and where Johannes and Dominique act as a craftsman and a merchant. Dominique's role as a merchant is pretty straightforward. You can buy weapons, armor, and accessories to beef up your stats, as well as food and different ingredients for Johannes to use. His job is crafting all of your items and equipment that Dominique will put in her shop afterwards, in addition to preparing all sorts of cuisines to heal Miriam if she gets hurt that'll also permanently raise stats the first time you eat it. As Miriam kills enemies, there's a chance they'll drop their shards to fuse with Miriam and give her a new power, ranging from passive abilities like showing breakable walls hiding goodies in classic Castlevania fashion, to summoning lightning that homes in on the closest foe. You can only carry one of each type unfortunately, so you should pick whichever suits your current situation. Nearly every enemy has a different shard to experiment with, and by obtaining the same exact shards, you can increase its potency up to a certain amount. There's an assload of shards to choose from, so you're guaranteed to find something that you like, and if you also have the right materials dropped from enemies, you can have Johannes increase the shard's rank, where when it gets to 9, it will have an attached secondary ability. I kinda wish increasing its potency and rank weren't done separately though. Given how many shards you'll acquire in the game, that just seems like more unnecessarily wasted time if you're trying to do absolutely everything you possibly can. It all feels a bit slow progressing to me. Actually, speaking of things moving slowly, yeah, let's talk about the performance in the Switch version. Granted, it has gotten a bit better in the passing year with its updates. Input lag is no longer an issue, there's a little more detail added to textures, and while the frame rate isn't at a full 60 like the other versions, it's fairly consistent, except for the Tower of the Twin Dragons that has an unbearable amount of slowdown, as well as the train section you have to go through with Zangetsu from Curse of the Moon. Oh yeah, I almost forgot about him. You'll come across Zangetsu from time to time who's looking to kill the returning Gremory, who, as seen earlier on the ship, is in cahoots with Jeeble. You know what, until this game, I had no idea idea that Gremory was female, so I guess that 40-year-old living in his mama's basement gag I made in the Curse of the Moon video doesn't make any sense at all now. I honestly thought it was a guy's name. It sounded close to Gregory. Can you blame me? Anyway, back to Zangetsu. He initially doesn't trust Miriam because of her Shardbinder abilities, to which I say, dude, you fought alongside her throughout the whole of the last game. What does it take to impress you, Solid Snake? And yes, Zangetsu is actually voiced by David Hayter, still rocking that kick-ass voice from his Metal Gear days, although he occasionally slips into a slightly different accent, which is a bit weird.
I've tried making contact with Gremory, but I have yet to cross paths with her even once.
While we're on the subject of voice acting, it's alright for the most part, bearing a couple of irritating characters like Dominique's little assistant. It's miles ahead of Symphony of the Night's voice acting, that's for certain, though that's not saying much. However, I really love the return of Robert Belgrade, the original actor for Alucard in Symphony of the Night, portraying a vampire librarian. That's something I wasn't expecting to write in my scripts. He was the best actor in that game with a couple of awesome line deliveries, but again, that's not exactly hard given how the other actors performed. The librarian anyway, named OD, lets you borrow up to 3 books that give you small benefits as long as you're carrying them, like increased XP or attack power. You can optionally fight him as well if you wanted to after fulfilling certain requirements. That's pretty cool. Right, where was I? I got really sidetracked there. Oh yeah, on top of Zangetsu, you'll rarely run into Alfred, another familiar face from Curse of the Moon, and also the mentor of Johannes. He's looking for a book known as the Liber Logaeth, which was used by Gremory to call forth the demons. We don't know what exactly he's going to use the Liber Logaeth for, but he's willing to kill Miriam if she continues to get in his way, so Alfred's clearly not in the right state of mind to be handling something like that. I won't go any further than that with the story. All I'll say is that it's serviceable with enough development in both plot and character to keep you interested, as was also the case with Symphony of the Night. It does what it needs to, and Miriam is a rather likable protagonist. Fairly serious, but knows when to smile, laugh, and crack a joke now and then.
I warned you. What you take from the library must be returned to the library.
Oops.
Not to mention, she's got a great character design to her. The blue dress, brown-tipped hair, and flower tattoos complement her very well. I think the horns are a little much personally, but I can thankfully replace them with an accessory carrying better stats, at the expense of potentially making Miriam look more ridiculous. Whatever you're equipping will be shown during cutscenes, most likely taking the seriousness out of the situation down a bit by Miriam's goofy attire. If you wish to go a step further, you can have Todd the barber in one part of the castle give you a new makeover, including your hairstyle, eye color, and even the color of your skin. You'll have more options to choose from if you find hidden books and give them to Todd, so go nuts. Alright, no more distractions. Let's go over the actual Metroidvania aspect of this Metroidvania adventure. This is why I play Castlevania, or Castlevania-like games. Maybe for the characters as well, but that's just an added bonus. Like many other games in the genre, a lot of rooms have tons of different paths to check out, and for first-timers, you'll never know what to expect. Whether it's an empty room containing nothing but a treasure chest, or a hallway of demons waiting to kill Miriam. There's only one way to further progress in the game, but how you get there is up to you to figure out, and a few shards will be found along the way to allow you access to more areas in the castle. You don't get nearly as many permanent upgrades as you do in something like Symphony of the Night though, which I was a little disappointed with. All you get is a double jump sinking into the water, a high jump that you can't even get without having the materials for Johannes to mix together, standard stuff. You do also get a shortcut menu that I almost find useless since it changes your equipment as well as your shards, so that means every time I find some new gear I have to keep changing the shortcuts to accommodate for that. The last of the permanent upgrades is pretty neat however. It allows you to invert gravity to access even more areas that were previously hard to reach, and in some rooms you can totally bypass groups of enemies you don't feel like dealing with. It's a good way to cheese a couple of the bosses a little too. You still can't get away from some of their attacks, but you can either land more hits this way or dodge the attacks a bit easier. Ritual of the Night is definitely harder than Symphony of the Night as a whole, but it isn't balls to the walls infuriating either. Enemies, environmental hazards, and especially bosses can lower a big chunk of your health quickly if you're not careful, and if you die, you're booted back to your last save, which is somewhat of an archaic design choice in my opinion. I'm not saying every room you enter needs an autosave, but you could be spending a long time exploring with no save room in sight, and I hate doing it all again if I got killed by something I wasn't prepared for. You could say the same thing about a lot of other Metroidvanias, but I did get a bit frustrated with Ritual of the Night at a few points. They pull that same crap they did with Symphony of the Night as well by completely locking a huge portion of the game unless you go for the true ending. ending. Thankfully though, it's not something as sloppily thrown in as an upside down castle. They're exclusive areas you can travel in, so that's a bit better. Entering these areas is the same deal as Symphony of the Night. You just need to explore the rest of the map and find the necessary trinkets, but you've also got to figure out that you're supposed to absorb the blood from a fountain. You also need to invert in this specific spot to find armor that nullifies environmental hazards in order to safely cross through these spikes to reach another chest. You additionally need to kill this one enemy in the underground area that drops a shard to let you swim through the water, otherwise you end up floating, and it doesn't always drop the shard to begin with. There's an absurd amount of prerequisites you need to meet just to truly finish the game, and it keeps going and going. Every time Ritual of the Night feels like it's about to end, there's usually something else that happens in the story, or a new area you need to explore, and it sorta wears you out after a while. Not including deaths, the game's about 11 to 13 hours long, which is a decent enough length, but it definitely felt longer than that to me. I really enjoyed my time regardless, but I don't know, I think it just needed to be a little shorter. I wasn't too bothered about it until I got to the ice caverns, and I was like, good lord, how is there still more? This isn't counting everything you can do in the main shopping area. There are monster hunting side quests to complete with a few nods to Castlevania, there's all the alchemy stuff, and there's an old lady that'll reward you for bringing the right food she asked for, some of which you need to talk to this guy, Harry, to plant seeds and grow the ingredients for said food. There's a lot going on here for a Metroidvania game. On the flip side though, because of Ritual of the Night shard mechanic and the heavy amount of options you have in your arsenal, this is an easily replayable game. Helping that is the randomizer mode that recently came out in a free update. You've got different kinds of variables you can tweak to make your next playthrough a bit more interesting. Key items being found in different spots, moving around save rooms, shuffling which side quests and shop items are available, the works. If the Switch version actually ran as well as other platforms, I would say this alone would be worth getting a Switch copy for. It's perfect for a handheld console hybrid, but I can only dream. Boss rush and speedrun modes are here as well, pretty self-explanatory, and there's the DLC pack you can purchase holding a sword that's also a whip, on top of an exclusive boss fight with Koji Igarashi himself. Neat stuff, neat stuff. Also added in a recent update was being able to play as Zangetsu. It's basically like the Richter mode in Symphony of the Night. There aren't any cutscenes, no story to be told, just Zangetsu running around everywhere in the castle and carrying all of his abilities from the get-go, which he has a surprisingly extensive list of attacks to choose from. I just wish Zangetsu's grunts weren't so loud and frequent. I forgot to mention that Miriam does it a lot as well, but Zangetsu just sounds like he's passing a hernia sometimes. It's mostly various sword techniques he can pull off, but he also has his grappling hook to cling onto surfaces and attack enemies with. He can add elemental properties to his sword, and he can run way faster than Miriam. Zangetsu's a freaking powerhouse all around. He can utterly destroy enemies and bosses with ease, but he's a great character for speedrunners, and since he doesn't acquire power-ups, he can access any part of the castle at any time, giving you plenty of different possibilities in completing the game. I've really forgotten how good these kinds of Metroidvania titles can be when done correctly, and Ritual of the Night is a great return to that style of gameplay. Like I said, there were plenty of other Metroidvania games that came before in Castlevania's absence, but I can imagine for a lot of Castlevania fans, this has hopefully scratched that itch they've had for over a decade. You don't even need to have played Curse of the Moon to enjoy Ritual of the Night. I think it helps if you do, since you'll know who the characters are, but you won't be totally lost if you decide not to. If you do have any sort of interest in this game but want the best performance, then I would suggest purchasing a copy for the PS4, Xbox One, or PC, because at this point, I don't think the Switch version is going to get any better. It's not like the game's even graphically heavy. It does look nice, but it's nothing spectacular, which makes me even more baffled as to why it runs the way it does on Switch. Anyway, another fantastic game by Mr. Igarashi and a great first impression by Artplay. I'm glad this has been received better than something like Death Stranding as Hideo Kojima's first game in his new studio. I should perhaps cover that too sometime.
And now that just leaves Curse of the Moon 2 to look at. I imagine by the time I do talk about that game though, another Bloodstained title will just be on the horizon. It has however kind of put me in the mood for some more Castlevania. Maybe I should consider doing another marathon, or at least another video or two. Next time we're discussing Destroy All Humans, both the original 2005 version and the remaster that just released at the time of this video. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Thanks everyone for watching, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll hopefully see you next time. It has however kind of put me in the mood for some more Castlevania. Maybe I should actually memorize my lines. Both the 2005 original and the remaster that just... God damn it. It has, however, kind of put me in the mood for some more Castlevania. I forgot my line.